tasks, participants, and chronometry. Here we're going to see several tables that can give us information about personal tasks, system tasks, and integrated tasks. So let's say we want to build a report and we want to add information, for example, the name of a certain task or the ID or things like this, or of maybe a system task, or maybe we want to build a report of all the integrated tasks that are related to certain personal tasks. In order to do this, we can use these tables that store a lot of this information. We're not going to enter in detail of all the data that these tables contain, but if we want more information, we can always check the knowledge base, or we can just enter these tables and fiddle around a little bit to find the information. There's another table that contains a lot of useful information related to the performers. Now, this is not the only table that we're going to need to use, because there can be all kinds of different performers. And for example, when we go to personal task, we could have the performer, we could have the responsible, we could have the substitute. So who are we looking for? Who do we want? Maybe we need to display this information in a report. And besides, even though we know if we're looking for the performer, the responsible, or the substitute, we might want to know, I don't know, other details like, is it a role? Is it maybe a general term that contains the performer, or a singular field, or maybe a column in a group of fields? Or is it a profile, a position? Or do we want to know the user type? So there's all kinds of other details that we might want to know in order to build our reports. Obviously, we can always check this table here, and we can also access the documentation and try to look for the best mechanism in order to retrieve this information from the database and display it in a report, for example. There's also interesting tables that contain a lot of information related to the chronometry, not only of the entire class of process, but also of a certain object in the process, or maybe in a certain span within a class of process. For example, let's say I want to know when the process started, when it ended, or I want to know the expected duration, the minimum duration, and all these little bits of information that I can define in the class of process settings. Well, then I'd have to go to AP BPM duration, and here I would find all of this information. If I want to find the specific information of the chronometry of a specific object in the class of process, for example, a personal task, then I'd go to this other table here, AP BPM tarea personal. And if I want to search for the information between a certain span or two different KPIs, then I'd use this other table here. It's called AP BPM puntos control. So I can add two control points, and then I can calculate values between these two control points and display them in a report. Another thing we want to take into account is that when we're designing applications, when we're building processes, families of records, and all of this, we might be using the server's time and we might be using the end user's time. So depending on the designer, what they've designed or what they built into the platform, we might be using one of these two different GMT formats. Maybe we're using the end user's GMT, or maybe we're just using the server's GMT. So we have to take this into account. If not, when we're building a report, the information that we find in the database might not be reliable because we're not taking into account the type of data that is being stored within our applications. Exercise 504. Thank you for your attention.